Break down that door!
The king ordered his guards to break down the door of the woman he was about to marry. Seconds later, what they found inside shook the entire kingdom. The woman's name was Adiaha. Long before she ever met the king, she had spent her entire life praying for just one thing: to be loved. Adiaha was born in a small Efik village where everyone knew one another. From the day she was born, people believed there was something terribly wrong with her face. By the time she turned 7, she had stopped trying to make friends. Every time she walked toward the other children, they walked away before she could reach them. One evening, as she was passing through a nearby compound, she saw a father chasing his daughter around the compound. The little girl laughed happily as her father chased her around. He finally caught her, lifted her high into the air, and kissed her forehead. "I love you," he said. Adiaha stood there for a moment. Then she quietly walked home. Nobody had ever looked at her that way. Years passed, but people never stopped laughing at her. By the time she was 13, her school began preparing for the new Yam celebration. The girls gathered in the open field to practice a traditional dance. Adiaha practiced too. Every evening after school, she copied every step until she knew the dance by heart. On the day the dancers were chosen, she waited hopefully. The teacher called one name after another. Her name never came. When everyone else had left, Adiaha slowly walked toward her teacher. "Ma, I know the dance. I've been practicing every day." The teacher looked at her for a long moment. "I know. Then, why wasn't I chosen?" The teacher sighed. "You dance well, but people won't be watching only your feet. They'll be looking at your face too. I don't want you to ruin the performance." For a moment, Adiaha couldn't speak. She forced a small smile. "I understand," she said. She turned away and walked toward the school gate. When she was finally alone, she began to cry. By the time she turned 18, she had stopped expecting kindness. One evening, her father and 2 brothers sat outside eating their supper. Adiaha carried her own plate and quietly walked toward them. She smiled. "Can I sit here today?" Her father didn't even look at her. "Take your food inside." She stood there. "I only want to eat with everyone." This time, he looked at her. His voice was calm. "I don't want people passing by to see us eating together. Go inside." Adiaha looked at her brothers. Neither of them spoke. She lowered her head, picked up her plate, and went back into the house. She ate alone, just as she always did. That night she couldn't sleep. She thought about leaving the village forever, starting over somewhere nobody knew her. But where would she go? She had no money, no relatives, no home waiting for her. By morning, she accepted the same truth she had accepted every day of her life. She had nowhere else to belong. Months passed. Nothing changed until one evening. The sun had gone down. Adiaha was washing a calabash outside her house when she glanced at the water. She froze. The face staring back at her wasn't hers. She blinked, then looked again. The rough skin she had lived with all her life was gone. Slowly, she touched her face. Smooth. She touched her neck. Smooth. Her hands began to shake. She ran inside, stood before the old mirror hanging on the wall, and gasped. The young woman staring back at her was breathtakingly beautiful. Adiaha couldn't breathe. She reached toward the mirror, almost expecting the reflection to disappear. It didn't. She stayed awake the entire night, unable to stop looking at herself. Then, just before sunrise, the beautiful face slowly faded away. The rough skin returned. Everything became exactly as it had been before. The following evening, it happened again, and again, and again. Soon, Adiaha understood. Every evening after sunset, she became the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. Every morning before sunrise, she became the woman the world refused to see. Then came the new Yam Festival. It was the biggest celebration in the village. As darkness settled, drums echoed through the night. Large fires lit the village square. Women arrived wearing colorful wrappers and coral beads. Men gathered around pots of fresh palm wine. Children ran from one fire to another, laughing. Inside her room, Adiaha stood before the mirror. The beautiful young woman looked back at her. She had seen this face many times, but she had never allowed anyone else to see it. She took a slow breath. "Just tonight," she whispered to herself. She quietly stepped outside. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. Nobody looked away. A woman carrying a basket full of yams smiled at her. "Good evening," the woman said warmly. Adiaha smiled back. "Good evening." It was such a simple greeting, yet no stranger had ever spoken to her with such kindness before. As Adiaha entered the village square, the drums suddenly fell silent. The village announcer stepped forward and raised his voice. "His Majesty King Eyamba is here." Everyone immediately bowed. King Eyamba entered the square surrounded by his chiefs and royal guards. He greeted the elders, then his eyes rested on Adiaha. He stopped walking. For a brief moment, he simply looked at her. Then he walked toward her. "My lady," said the king with a smile, "I don't believe we've met before." Adiaha lowered her eyes respectfully. "No, your majesty." The king smiled. "What is your name?" Her heart began to pound. She couldn't say, "Adiaha, not here, not now." "My name is Mfon," she replied quietly. The king nodded. "Mfon, it is a beautiful name." Then he held out his hand. "Would you honor me with a walk?" Adiaha hesitated. Then she gently placed her hand in his. Together, they walked through the festival. The king greeted villagers as they passed. Adiaha listened more than she spoke. As they walked, an elderly woman stumbled while carrying a heavy basket of roasted yam. Before anyone else reacted, Adiaha hurried over. "Please, let me help," she said. The elderly woman smiled. "Thank you, my daughter." The king watched without saying a word. "You notice people others walk past," he said. Adiaha smiled. Then she answered quietly, "I know what it feels like to wish someone would notice you." The king didn't reply, but he remembered her words.
As the celebration came to an end, the king turned to her. "I hope this won't be the last time we meet." Adiaha smiled softly. "I should go now, your majesty." She bowed respectfully. Then she turned around and walked into the crowd. Long before sunrise, she was back inside her room. When morning came, the beautiful face slowly faded away. Her familiar face returned. 3 days passed. She never stepped outside after sunset. She told herself that meeting the king had been a mistake. On the 4th evening, royal guards went from house to house, asking people about Mfon. After searching several compounds, they finally stopped at Adiaha's home. Her parents were sitting outside. One of the guards stepped forward. "Is there any young woman called Mfon in this compound?" Adiaha's father looked confused. "Mfon? No, there is no one here by that name." The guard looked around the compound. "Are you sure?" "Yes," her father replied. "We have no daughter called Imfon." Inside the house, Adiaha heard every word. She quietly moved closer to the window. She looked outside. The royal guards were still standing there. Her heart started beating faster. She knew they were looking for her. She stood completely still. Outside, one of the guards looked toward the house. Then he turned back to Adiaha's father, thanked him for his time, and they walked away. Adiaha waited until she could no longer hear their voices. Only then did she let out a deep breath. That night, sleep refused to come. Nobody had ever searched for her before. Nobody had ever wanted to see her again. The following day, she waited for the sun to set. Then she packed a small bundle of clothes. She looked around the only room she had ever known. There was nothing else she wanted to take. Without saying goodbye, she quietly sneaked out of the house. She went straight to the king's palace. The guards stopped her at the gate. "Who are you?" one of them asked. She took a deep breath. "My name is Imhon. Tell the king I've come." Several minutes later, he returned. "His Majesty will see you."